everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host, Carolyn. Hi, film critic and journalist. And this is the podcast / YouTube channel where I talk to film creatives about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I am joined by a special guest, producer Rebecca Pruzan, who produced the short film, Ivalu, which has been nominated for the 2023 live action short film category. And I'm very happy to be talking to you because I saw this film and it made me choked up. I got all emotional. I was in my feels watching this film. And I think it deals with very serious topic issues. And I can't wait to get into that. But as usual, before I begin talking about the films, I usually like to let my guests say a bit about themselves and what got them into filmmaking or involved with the film industry. So Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me today. And congratulations on the film and being nominated, and to you and the whole crew and cast. So can you talk a bit about yourself first, and what made you decide to become a producer?
Well, actually, this is actually my first film. So yes, I've been working in and I'm with media my whole life. I'm originally I have my master's in information technology, so it's gone from something completely different to here. But for the last many years, I've worked at the Danish Broadcasting Corporation, which is the equivalent of the BBC in Denmark. And for the last many years, I was working as a commissioning editor on children's programming. And I think working with this film hasn't been much different. I mean, it's a different media because it's film, but the kind of work producing the film has been very much like the work that I've done at DR. So, and the topic working with children is also my favorite. So, yes, it's not that different and that far from what I've done before, but it is my first film.
Right. I think for our first film, like you picked a very particular topic to produce, and as you said, like you love working with children, you love working with content that has to do with children. Is that what drew you to Ivalu, to make you decide this is the film I want to produce, because it deals with two girls in particular, two sisters, and it talks about abuse, and I think it also talks about cultural identity too, because it's set in Greenland, and it talks about the cultural identity of these two Greenland Inuit girls, these two sisters. And is that what drew you to the project?
Definitely. The film is based on a graphic novel. And so it was actually Anders Walter, who is the director of the film, who's also a very close friend, someone who I've worked with before, and my husband has worked with him before. He was given the graphic novel by a friend who lives in Greenland, and she read it and gave it to him because she thought it was right up his alley, because he has also a history. I mean, all his films has always dealt with children in need of some sort. So when she read the novel, she gave it to him, and he immediately loved it, and he gave it to me. And so the graphic novel is amazing. I wish I had it here so I could show you. It's a beautiful, beautiful graphic novel with the most astonishing colors, and the drawings of the Greenlandic vast nature is just astonishing. But then at the same time, it has the most brutal storyline. So this contrast between the poetic pictures and the almost childish colors, and then the contrast of the brutality of the story. I remember sitting right here on my sofa here reading it. It's very brief, and it blew me away. It made me cry. And I knew from that on that I had to just, do whatever I could to help Anders Walter make this film. So, yeah, so we could share it. But we did see that the novel is very depressing. The film is pretty hard too, but the graphic novel is even more hard, as it has a very different ending than we put into our film. So we took the graphic novel and we used as much as we could, but we did change parts of it. And the most significant thing we changed was the ending. So you've seen the film, and in the film there is a grandmother who is a witness to the girl's disappearance, and who, I don't know if I should say what it ends with, but it has a positive ending, and it was a very important thing for me that it ends with a sense of hope.
No, I for my individual journey going into spoilers because I go very in depth with my questions, and the ending you were talking about in the graphic novel, which I haven't read, but I think I know what it was because there was a moment close to the end of the film. I was like, no, I had this moment of trepidation because she talks about how she's going to follow her sister, and and when you find out what her sister does, you're thinking in your head, this little girl thinks she has no other option because she feels alone, and she feels very isolated from her family because it's just her and the dad and the grandmom, but the dad doesn't care at all. And when the film starts out, and I think it's interesting that this film is in her internal dialogue. Like, she's telling the story to herself, and she's telling the story to someone who's listening. And you realize at the beginning it starts with her getting up and looking for her sister, and you immediately wonder, why is no one worried about this little girl? Like, no one is looking for her. The dad doesn't care. The grandmother, she's just like this, almost like this background observer. And no one in the school, no teachers, there's no police investigation. And I was wondering the entire time, how long has she been missing? So I've been wondering if she's been missing for a while. But then the way the film starts, it made me think that this is the day she wakes up is when she realizes her sister is not coming back. So she's actively looking for her this time. She realized I'm the only person who has to look for her because no one else is doing it. And it's a very hard topic because it deals with sexual abuse. And I think it also deals in a way with it deals with emotional abuse, because Ivalu was the one who was sexually abused by the father. And Pipaluk is I think she's being emotionally abused in the fact that she has no emotional connections to her father. He doesn't look after her. Her mother is not there. The grandmother doesn't live with them. So she's all alone, and she's dealing with a traumatic experience, and no one is there helping her process this. So when you were working with Anders on putting this film together, what kind of discussions did you have about how the story would be told and the way you wanted to tell it?
Well, I mean, I think the most important part that we've been pretty much in agreement the whole time. We really haven't had any conflicts about how to do this. But the one thing that I think was the most important for me, and I'm glad that he agreed, that we had to change the ending of the book, because the book is just brutal. I mean, it ends with the little sister Pipaluk finds the sister Ivalu hanging. She's committed suicide. She's just hanging. And life can be brutal. I mean, it's not that this does, and it's not like we wanted to give it to some happy Disney ending, but we still felt a big obligation when we're dealing with such an emotional and sensitive topic, and it's such a big taboo. We wanted to make sure that without making it into this too innocent, we just wanted to give it some sort of hope. It's still a very sad and emotional film, but at least there is some sort of hope. The way she travels through time, she keeps on seeing all these different scenes of what had, what it could have been and what has been, but it's now empty. So all these scenes of where they used to play together and do, wonderful things together, and now they're just empty. So all these flashbacks to the emptiness, at least at the end, and she goes through this trip, which is also an internal, voyage for her to realize what has happened to her sister. At least she ends up in an embrace of someone who takes care of her. She doesn't live there anymore. And somehow you can trust that there is some sort of future for her that's better than what happened to her sister. Mm-hmm. And I think when you deal with this, if there's someone in the audience who've had the same kind of experience or, has dealt with this kind of trauma, to feel seen, to know that you're a part of a community, that there is someone out there, if it's a school teacher or a grandparent or a doctor, whoever, that there is someone out there, that you're not alone, and that the future can be different,
And did you and Anders have any kind of conversations with the original author of the graphic novel? Like because you're adapting it, not only adapting, but you're also changing the story a bit because you, as you said, you wanted to make the ending more hopeful, which I totally understand and I agree with, because the ending of that film would have been way too depressing considering the subject topic. And it's not that you're trying to sugarcoat it or you're trying to dismiss what the author was writing in the original novel, but I think I agree that sometimes for these kind of stories you do have to show the audience, or for anyone who may be potentially triggered by it, or who knows someone who's going through the situation, to show them that there is you can have a happy ending, or at least an ending where the possibility of happiness is present, right? So I agree with like changing the story. But what was the original author's thoughts on the adaptation and the change?
They were very, I mean, I didn't have much dialogue with them. Anders did a little bit in the beginning. They knew that, I mean, they accepted and they agreed on us, adapting the film, so the book into a film. And but the process itself of developing the manuscript, they weren't a part of it. And they didn't know until after we had done it. And I'm very happy to say that they both really agree with, the transformation of their story. So only good feedback. And they're extremely happy with, with the way that the film has come alive and how it's been perceived all over the world. And so only good, they're only happy about the way we changed it.
That, because I think it's now that the film has been nominated for an Oscar, it does help not only spread the word about the film and the work that you and Anders and the crew and the cast have done, but also about the original graphic novel. Because I to be honest, I don't think I've ever read any kind of story that was written by a Greenland Inuit, or watched a film by or featuring Greenland Inuit. So I think this is a way to help get the identity of the indigenous people out, because to be honest, like when we think of Inuit, we think of like North American Inuit, like the Inuit who live in Alaska and like the Northern Territories of Canada, like where I live. But we don't really think of the indigenous people of areas like Greenland and Iceland, and I think this film does highlight their culture, because it talks about like the confirmation ceremony that Pipaluk and her sister had to do, and it shows their traditional dress and like how they live there, and how like fishing is a part of their culture, as it is with every Inuit culture. Like they're very in touch with their environment and nature. And also it talks about their traditional practices like storytelling and their mythology. So talk a bit about as a producer, your part in pulling the cast together and in helping support Anders to bring this particular story to life, because it is a story about Inuit culture, and you have to make sure that you respect the culture and that you're respecting the cast and the crew.
And especially because so you probably don't know that, but Greenland is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. But it's also a sovereign. So it's a sovereign country. They have their own government, but it's also part of our kingdom. So so there's also some, it's also a little bit sensitive about, the colonization and all that. But what we did was, I mean, for us, it was extremely important that we didn't go to Greenland and a big Danish team going in, doing the thing and then going. So it was only Anders and I and the cinematographer who went up there, and my husband, Kim, who's also a producer on the film. We work very closely with a Greenlandic production company, Pruzan. And they're co-producing the film, and Pipaluk K Jorgensen, who is the co-director of the film, together with Anders. I mean, we could not have done this film without them. And it was also we all knew from the beginning we would not do this film if we didn't do it together with them. Because, we were totally dependent on, just the fact that it's in Greenlandic. We don't speak Greenlandic, even though Anders and I did do a little bit of a course before. It's very different language, and we don't understand it. So we would have scenes where, in our eyes, it would, it was a very good scene, and then she would be like, no. I mean, the way she pronounced was so wrong. So we could never have done this without them. in any, I mean, we did the whole, just getting the casting in the beginning, because of COVID, we couldn't go there. So we had to do casting via Zoom.
Mm.
And so they found, I mean, there's not that many people in Greenland. It's 58,000 people. So it's not a very big community. And obviously the number of people so she found, I think, like 10, 15 girls in the different age groups that we could, that she suggested for the casting. And we did the whole thing over Zoom. And when we met Mila, who plays Pipaluk, we all agreed that she was the perfect person to portray Pipaluk. But still, I don't think we had no idea when we did that she would be this fantastic that I think she is.
Mm-hmm.
And the same for who plays her older sister Nivi, who plays Ivalu. I think both girls are amazing. I think they are so brave and courageous. They come from a very small society. And to stand up and be part of a film that touches on this, big taboo, and to put their face on, in this film, I think they are the stars. I mean, they deserve all the credit in the world for standing up and to doing this film. And then I think they're so good. I think they're amazingly good, both of them.
They are very good. The whole film is about basically the two of them. It's a very contained film. It's mainly these two sisters who, like, you have to get a sense of their connection and their dynamic as sisters through vignettes. It's like we're not getting like full run-on scenes. We're getting scenes of them like fishing, scenes of them like in the boat and telling this story, and like them at home, or just like people watching her sister do her confirmation ceremony, and you have to you're already getting a sense that they love each other deeply, but also that people really looks up to Ivalu, and that she's like the person that she aspires to be, and she listens to the most. And I think one of the scenes that really touched on how, like, even living in the same house, like because Pipaluk is so young, she doesn't understand how she doesn't fully understand emotionally or mentally what her sister is going through. Like, she knows because she talks about hearing the noises outside the bedroom door. But like, there's this scene where her sister, they're fishing and they catch this rockfish, and it seems like, oh, it's going to be a happy moment because they've been fishing forever and they finally caught one. But then Ivalu just, like, she takes the oar and she just starts to mash it. And that's the scene where I really started to realize, wait, something is up. Because before then, the monologue really, it just makes you think, okay, she's missing, and you're wondering, why is she missing? And it actually, the entire time I was thinking of this film is like how in North America there's campaigns for missing and Indigenous women, because like Indigenous women and young girls, when they go missing, like the police, the media don't really do anything to find them, right? They don't really offer any kind of support. And it may be kind of thing, even in Greenland where this film is set, like even their the searching for missing Indigenous girls are not a priority. But then when you realize, oh, okay, so something else at home is going on, and it's such a violent moment. But I think the way that Anders filmed it, where it's like it's focusing on the fish, but then it focuses on Pipaluk's face. These two girls, I think they did a fantastic job using their just expressing a lot through their eyes. And for novice actresses, I think they did a really good job, especially with the intense storytelling. So talk to me a bit about that particular scene, because I think that scene is one of only two scenes in the film where there's any kind of like violence in it, you would say, because I think for most of the film is people looking for her sister. And we're going to get into that because I love the cinematography in this film. But talk to me about that particular scene and how you not only just as producer, but just as an observer and a viewer watching the film felt about that particular scene, because I think it just says so much about the film.
Yeah, well, I think it was a hard scene, especially because Nivi, who plays Ivalu, she's not a very outspoken. She's not the Mila, who plays Pipaluk, is much more expressive, and Nivi is a more closed person. And actually, she is this character. And when this scene, it was hard for her to actually just show the rage and to actually, she's smashing the fish and she's being, violently aggressive, and it's so not her nature. It's not Nivi's nature and it's not Ivalu's nature. Okay, so both the part and the person. But I think that's that's also like, and it's the same with Mila. I think that's where she realizes something is wrong. So that's, as you say, there's so little. They're talking but it's always underneath the surface. And this is the first time it explodes and it comes out. And it was a dramatic scene also because we were on the ocean. The water you told me just before we started how cold it is where you are now. It was freezing. Doing shooting in Greenland was really, really cold. So I was, just even nervous if they would fall into the water. And, we put life vests on them, even though it didn't look that good on film, because I was worried they would fall into the water when they were going. They were both fine and nothing happened. But it was, but both that scene and then also the scene where you talked about before, where she's sitting outside the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
That was also, a very emotional scene. And the first time she realizes that, something is going on, and we didn't really want to show anything. That was a choice we made early on, that we didn't really think it's not appropriate. That's not what we wanted. We wanted to show how the actions that did take place, how they affected this little girl. It wasn't so much the scene itself. It was, her reaction and how she, how she's put into this. I think that was the more interesting. And to me, that makes it much more scary and emotional than actually seeing the act itself.
Were there any discussions with Mila about this? Because nothing is shown to the audience, so she as the actress and the person that's there doesn't see anything. Like, she doesn't have to be on set to see like a violent reenactment or anything. But like, what was the discussions with her, telling her what the story is, especially the particulars of what the character of Ivalu would have been experiencing? Because you have to be like, in that moment, you have to see the fear and the worry and the frustration, because she's terrified and she's crying, and there's so much that has to happen in this scene. But so what was the conversations with her? Do you know?
Well, with both girls in the casting, we knew that we were dealing with a very sensitive subject matter. So for us, it was very important that the girls that were cast, that we knew that they had good family backgrounds, that they had someone who, could embrace them and who could talk to them in a serious way of the subject matter, because it shouldn't just be, too new a producer or a director or a co-director, whoever who would explain this to them. They needed to have a strong family to be able to talk about this at home. Even for me, I have two children, 10 and 12, especially for my girl who's 12. I felt a big obligation when I, telling her what this film is about. It's, how you don't want your children to know that something as atrocious as that happens in the world. But that's part of unfortunately of what happens in the world. So both girls, Mila understood what was going on. Both girls knew what was going on. And I know that they had, for both mothers, it was a big thing, going through the script with them. It wasn't just us, but it was also the parents who had good conversations with them about it.
Right. And for Mila Minu, I think, because as I said, the film is very contained and it focuses mainly on them. They're on locations that to me they seem very like a lot of the locations are very isolated, and I thought it was actually kind of a smart way to show not only the landscape of Greenland, but also in a way the mental where these girls are mentally and emotionally, they're feeling mentally and emotionally isolated, but they're also physically isolated, because it's just the two of them in almost all of their scenes. They're on fishing, they're by themselves, they go to these outcroppings, these cliffs, and it's just them by themselves. And then there's and I think it shows it's talking about the beauty of Greenland, but then how even those simple landscapes, anything that's that beautiful can seem terrifying depending on the context, And I think the cinematography in this film is stunning and is fantastic. But it also, there's a particular scene and there's a shot where Pipaluk, she talks about this US military base, and it just made me think, oh my gosh, of course, even there in the middle of nowhere in Greenland, there's a US military base. And they talk about how, and I thought it was so, and I just thought it was amazing that Pipaluk says her sister, Ivalu, tells her, like, nothing can grow there. And like, she wouldn't stay there because like the land is toxic. You know, she's like, they poison the land. And it was like, just like that one moment, like if you understand like the history of like colonization and American imperialism, but also the environmental ramifications of American imperialism, because there's been studies done where almost in every US base around the world, there's like pollution, like toxic pollution of the water and of the land and even of the airspace. And you have that one scene, but it says, I think, a lot also about the politics of Greenland and, as you would say, Denmark, because as you say, like, it's sovereign, but it's still a part of Denmark. So talk about adding that part in, because I thought it was completely unexpected, but I thought it also speaks of what the Greenland Inuit think about the American presence in Greenland, but also that these two young girls are also very aware of what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, actually, in the graphic novel, it's the nature is portrayed. I mean, it's like she runs through all over Greenland. So we did get funding, but we did not have enough money at all had we had more funding, we would have had the trip or the voyage would have been much broader around Greenland. We actually only shot in 3 places, where the first was in Nuuk, the capital, and a small, it was pretty much all around there. And then in Kangerlussuaq, which is at the inland ice at Russell Glacier, which is also where the American, where they were, that American base was also, the Void American base was also located. But I think the way that we use nature here, would you probably notice that also. I mean, the more she realizes what has happened, the more vast, the more grand, and the more cold nature gets.
Yeah.
So that's exactly as you pointed out. I mean, what we wanted to show is the loneliness. I mean, because in the beginning she is at school and she's, in the town close to her grandmother, and there are people around her. But the more she goes into this inner voyage, the more she realizes what has happened and what she's gone through. Nature becomes smaller and smaller in this vast nature. And the same with the American military base. I mean, I think it's so beautiful. I mean, it's just a few shots, but it's so beautiful. And the meaning, as you say, is you can put whatever into it, but it has a very, big symbolic meaning. The same goes, what you probably don't know is at the end where they stand waving, there's a boat or ship out in the ocean. Which is the
Queen's ship, right? It's like the Queen Mary. It would have been the Queen. No, it would have been the Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, I remember.
No, that's a Danish Queen Margaret.
Oh, that's the. Yeah. Oh, okay.
We have our own queen.
I always forget that. I'm not gonna lie.
And I would just say we have an awesome queen. She's super cool. And I'm not a big royalist, but I think we have a very cool queen. So I don't really mean to criticize her person, but there is a big symbolic meaning of having, her boat out and coming in and everyone waving at her and all being all dressed up and welcoming her and smiling. And she just feels this, she's not happy. She doesn't take part of the happiness around her. So people can also, put a symbolic meaning into that ship coming at that very point in the film.
Okay, yeah. So that's the thing. So I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Barbados, and we didn't. Did we have to? Yes, when it was in primary school, like when we had the queen or anyone from the royal family visiting, like we had to get dressed up. If you're in school at that time, you have to put on your uniform. Got to be pressed and pristine, hair done. And they make us like line up on the side of the road to like wave. And this would have been like years ago, like when I was way younger, but like you would have to stand up on the side of the road and watch these people in their Rolls Royce drive past, or in my mom's year, back in her day, because my mom was born in 1953, but for her and for my dad and all of them, it was the same thing. You have to put on this pomp, and it's the whole pomp and circumstance of recognizing the royalty. You gotta and dress up and play the part of the pageantry. So when when they were talking about that, my mind did automatically go to the British royalty, and I did forget that that there is a Danish royal family, but
actually, when we were filming in Greenland, it wasn't planned, but was actually at the same time as the Queen was visiting. And I think it's not just one way or the other. I mean, I think people has conflict feelings, because I think there's a history with Denmark and Danish imperialism that is not loved and cherished. But at the same time, I think we also have, because the people itself in the institution are very cool. I mean, the Crown Prince, they love Greenland, and they have a very close bond, and he's been he's been living there, and so I think there is affections that are against, and she represents that what people don't like, but at the same time they're just really, really, they're nice people. And when we were filming there, I saw the Queen. I mean, she did not drive around a big Rolls Royce. She's 80 something, and it was freezing cold, and she said, "I'm walking," so she's walking in the cold, and she's waving and embracing people who are waving at her. So I think that it's a conflict within people. I think in one way they cherish and they like, and they actually do want to wave, but at the same time they don't want to be put in a situation that they have to wave to, the symbol of imperialism. So I think it's a conflict.
It is. It just was. I completely did forget about the Danish royal family. But the thing is, and it kind of and I think, as you said, I think it's also really great that you and Anders and the crew took that opportunity, and you were like, you know what, she's here, let's tie it in, because it does tie into the whole the scene with the military base, and it's also a way of tying in how even while Pipaluk is going through this very traumatic experience, she still has to, in a sense, put on a performance for people. Like, she's feeling she's trying to process this thing that happened to her sister, not only with the father, but what her sister eventually did. And and she has all of this going on, but she's still no one is paying attention to the fact that this little girl is falling apart on the inside, but she's still expected to put on the pretty dress, make sure she goes to school and looks good and smile and wait for this person who doesn't know her and she doesn't know. And no one is interested in the fact that this little girl is just being tormented. So I think that's actually a really good way of showing how, for a lot of people, not only young children who are suffering abuse and trauma, but for grown adults, for a lot of adults who are if they were going through a depressive episode, we call it masking. If you're going through a depressive episode, if you're a functioning depressive, you still have to perform, you still have to get up, go to school, go to work, go look after your kids. But on the inside, you're just your brain is just going, I'm here, while you're on the inside. So that I actually related a lot to that aspect of the film and to that scene. And I related a lot to people in that moment. But in talking about the masking and putting on a performance, the time where we see her really start to show how much she's struggling is, as we mentioned, the landscaping. And not only does she become smaller and smaller in perspective to the landscape and the size, but it becomes colder, because she moves away from I thought it was interesting how the film moves away from the community, and she goes further and further away as she becomes isolated, till she eventually ends up on this glacier. And I was terrified. I was like, if something happens to this child out here, no one is going to know. No one is going to be able to find her.
Yeah, I heard that, people thinking, now she's going to, go through the ice, or, something, like a natural catastrophe will happen. And actually that was something we were worried about, because for me, I mean, we're not used to this kind of nature in Denmark. So we were very dependent. We had a glacier guide, a fantastic Adam Liebæk, who took us out to Russell Glacier. And I mean, it was beautiful, and the snow had fallen, but I was worried, can we walk on this? And he was just like, he said, Rebecca, the ice is whispering to me, you're safe, and it was, the nature is astonishing and it's fantastic. But I heard from other people that there was, a fear that something dramatically would would happen to her. But yeah,
it was terrifying. I was like, if she falls into a crevasse, like not only just the actress, but just like the character, because I was thinking in my head, if this was a story and this is the character, I'm like, if she fell into a crevasse, no one would know that she's missing, and I was thinking, would anyone go looking for her? Because no one seems to care about her sister missing. Would anyone go looking for her? And then there's this shot. I think this shot is stunning, where like she's on the glacier and she's running, but it's just her footprints.
Yes,
it's just her. She's just slowed down, and all you see is her footprints. And I think it's just a stunning piece of cinematography in that scene. But it just highlights like she's all alone. Like no one else has been where she is. Like no one else is looking, and she's cold, and the landscape is just blistering white and blue. Like nature is beautiful, but it's also extremely dangerous. And in this moment, like she has this crow that's talking to her, telling her, if you follow me, you'll find your sister. And so this is another instance where I believe it's talking about Inuit mythology and culture, where it's like she follows this crow. And it kind of made me think there's another story that I remember from years ago where it's kind of the same thing, where this crow was like leading this little girl. And it kind of reminds me of the story of Nancy the Spider, which is a West African and Caribbean folklore, where Nancy would lead children and like talk to children if the children aren't being listened to, but then also Nancy was a trickster, and Nancy would play tricks on the kids. And I was wondering if that was the same thing was happening with the crow. I'm like, is this crow really leading her to her sister? But then that's where we see that it does lead her to her sister, and this revelation of it is devastating. That's when you realize, because it leads her to the boat, and then it touches back on the story on the spirit in the water. And I don't know, I think for me that's when I really did get choked up, because I realized this story is really about something that doesn't get touched on often, and it's something doesn't get, it's being told from the perspective of another victim, because like in the story, Pipaluk is a victim too, and like usually in Western media in particular, if you get a story about sexual abuse or sexual assault and abuse in that way, it's kind of like a police procedural, something like CSI or one of those cop shows, where it like the victim isn't really the point of the story. It's about the cops or the FBI agents or CSI agents looking for these ones. But in this story, it's about the victims. It's about it's telling the story from their perspective. So so for you, I have to ask this question, like as a woman, like when you're working on a project like this, like was there any moment where you had to like you said you worry about your kids and you have to talk to your kids, like, but for you personally, was there any moment where during production or even after production, like after you saw the film, where you realized that this film had the potential to hopefully start a discussion on sexual abuse and like advocacy for children and paying more attention?
I think that's the whole purpose. For me, that's the purpose of making this film, because it is such a big taboo, and I think the best way of breaking a taboo is starting a conversation like you and I right now. So I think that's such an important part. And also I think, I need to put on battery. Sorry. Okay. I think, also, both breaking the taboo by starting a conversation, by also having for girls or boys who's been in this situation to be seen, that there's actually a film talking about what this thing that they've been subject to, and I think there's not much literature, not much art that touches upon this, because it's so painful. It's something we don't want to be reminded of. We don't want to hear about it. This film will also be we've made a collaboration with a Danish publisher who will make school books, taking important parts of the film that will be used in high schools in both Denmark and Greenland, to also broaden the conversation into I mean, these have like from 15 and up, I think 14 and 15 and up. So for they're still children, you know, young people. And I think even though we don't want to talk about it, I think we do need to talk about it. And I think it's important to, you know, unfortunately, what happens with you know, children who are in this situation, you know, with the most, you know, where you need to feel the safest is where they're, you know, exposed to the most horrible thing that can happen. And often these children will, you know, they feel guilty and they feel sorry for their parents and, you know, all these emotions, but often they feel guilt. And if there's one thing they shouldn't feel, it's guilt. And I think by you know, making it okay to talk about is a way of breaking this, you know, feeling of guilt and a feeling of taboo.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't mentioned the word yet, but I have to mention the word because I was just thinking that we're talking.
I'm taking you with me because I need to take my power.
It's okay. Go plug your laptop in.
Okay, but just continue. I'm listening.
No, I was thinking like we were talking about how the film is about sexual abuse of girls and also of boys, because boys are also victims of sexual abuse, and how the film is highlighting this and how it, and the trauma that children who are abused go through. But I think also it talks about suicide, you know, like that's because that's what Ivalu does, and that's also another taboo subject, you know, how and even when you're talking about adults who are like severely depressed and who are for different circumstances commit suicide, even for society, we still don't like talking about, you know, about a suicide. But the film talks about a child committing suicide, and I think that's also a very heavy topic, and it's also a very it's something that people don't like to acknowledge, because like in a way I was just thinking, in a way people would say, oh, suicide isn't something that a child would ever think to do. But I would say that's not true, because children do commit suicide. And like the film talks about how for this child, that Ivalu, she sees no way out. You know, she thinks that there's no way for her to recover mentally and emotionally and physically. And that's the only way she saw out. And like in the film, I thought that was actually what Pipaluk was going to do too. When she talked about following her sister, I thought she was going to do the same thing. And that terrified me when I was watching this film. I felt like I was just like, I am not prepared for this. But so talk also about that aspect of it, because that's because for so many children still don't understand the concept of death, you know. But in a situation like this, or even in severe cases of bullying, children that are severely bullied do commit suicide. So like, I think,
and actually, the numbers are actually, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I mean, they're so high. I mean, they should not be there, but they are very high, especially in Greenland. Also in Greenland, you know that. But I think that's another thing we adapted into that was not part of the graphic novel, was the myth of the mother of the sea. You know, and the symbol that it's also to somehow make it not as brutal, because you know, here in the film, you see the Ivalu is, you know, we realize she's been swimming down to try to untangle the hair of the mother of the sea to sort of create, you know, recreate stability, you know, in society and also in the life of her little sister. And I think, I mean, it's an almost childish way of, you know, of showing the most, you know, desperate act a human can do. I mean, taking your own life. But I don't think it makes it less emotional watching it. I mean, you know what's happening. But I think maybe it makes it even, I think we did it also to try to make it easier to talk about, because if it's, somehow it can be just brushed off. If it's too much or too brutal or too explicit, it's easier to just brush off as too much. But it's not, I mean, this way you can't not talk about it, and you can't close your eyes to it. And it's a reality. And unfortunately, it is a reality for, I mean, no child should ever, you know, come that far out that they're actually, that's the only solution. But that's what happened.
Yeah, and I also saw that you said like it was a way for her in her mind creating stability, but I also kind of saw it almost as a sacrifice for people. Like she believed that if she did this, that what happened to her would have happened to her sister. And using the mother of this of the sea as kind of a metaphor too, because it's in a way for her for seeking a comforting embrace from some other entity. Like she's not getting this comfort at home, you know, so she needs to find it in the sea, and she finds it in this mythological creature. So where did since that's not in the graphic novel, where did Anders come up with the idea of adding that into the story?
Well, it's a very, I mean, myths are a big part of Greenland culture, as the Inuit culture, and so it was something that we chose early on. It's also a very typical thing, way of creative expression of Anders Walter. I don't know if you've seen any of his other films. He made a few years ago, I think 7 or 9 years ago, he made another short film called Helium that actually won an Academy Award, where it talks about a child who's dying from an illness. And in that, he also used, it wasn't myths, but it was also like a different layer of, a graphic layer that makes it easier for a child to accept, to pass on to the next stage. And I think, and it's a very typical, Anders Walter thing to almost make something magical or childish, like a childish imagination into the film, which I think makes it, I love that, that part of it. And it doesn't, I don't think it makes it less hard, but it just makes it more easier to grasp or easier to talk about. And that's, we really wanted to be something that people could watch and start a conversation about, and not just, it wasn't just too much. It's not something you can close your eyes to.
No, for sure. So I think it's a metaphor that children would be able to understand, and that parents and teachers could use to speak to children about. And speaking about teachers, that you mentioned that there's going to be teaching materials that are going to be distributed in the school. So I think it's amazing that that's such a positive outcome of the film. Like this, like you have now a tangible teaching tool. So talk a bit about that. But like I imagine, like, how did that happen? Like, was that something that you and Anders and the team came up with, or was it like, for instance, like maybe the school board or something?
No, it was something that I did because I think, to me, I mean, that's how I normally work. I like to make collaboration with different, so we have different outlets and different inputs. We're also working with the Save the Children organization, who is going to use the film both here in Denmark. For us, I mean, as I said, it was for us. There was like two lives of the film. The film has an artistic life, and it goes to festivals, and now it's been nominated, and that's one life, and it's wonderful and fantastic, and that's how it gets spread out in the world. That's how it travels, and then it has the other life where it will actually make, I hope, a big difference to people and children who sees it and who talks about it. I've also worked a lot closely with different psychologists and experts who work with this topic on a daily basis. And for them, they say that it's, this is such a big taboo. If they come into a dinner party and, the person sitting next to them asks, so what do you do for a living? And, well, I work as a psychologist. And with this subject, it's like, it's so hard. People turn, almost physically turn away, and it's not because they don't want to, it's just, it's so hard that it's almost too much to talk about. In her opinion, the one chief psychologist from Copenhagen that I spoke to, in her opinion, that's also why in Denmark, the hospitals are, they're not getting funding in this field. The research is being limited, and they're closing. They just closed the biggest place in Copenhagen for children who are victims of incest has just been been closed down. So there's now no free psychological help to them. They can find it maybe in the city they live in, but it comes down to money, which it shouldn't be. It should be something that's that's offered. And so this is that's what we really hope that this film will make. Will put focus on this, and make people realize it's something it's extremely important, and the people I mean, there are a lot of other problems in the world, but this is just such a hard thing for these children who are victims, because they don't talk about it and they don't feel the hurt and they don't feel seen. And well, I hope this little film will help do that too. Not just, and that's why I'm saying it has two life. It has the school life and the Save the Children life and the political life, and then it has the artistic life and I think both will hopefully make a difference.
Well, the artistic life and getting nominated for an Oscar and like all of the awards that it's won will definitely help boost the real life side of it, because like it does lend I hate to use the word, but validation and credibility to the story. And you can say, well, this is an Oscar nominated or hopefully Oscar winning film, and like that could help with funding. And I think it's amazing the way it kind of ties into your previous your work working with the broadcasting station, because like that's where your ability to be able to say this is how getting these kind of stories used to create a program, a children's program, or even a program for their parents where we can talk about sexual abuse and incest and mental health issues in children and in teenagers. Like that's the way for you. Like I can imagine for you, you're saying like, I've gone into producing, but it's still part of what I used to do all those years, like working for the TV station.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think
it's extremely rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so I know we're gonna have to wrap it soon. So I want to ask you, for you, what is next? So are you and Anders working on any other projects? Or are you working on another production soon? Or you're
not right now. I mean, he's finishing. He was doing parallel to this. He was actually doing his first Danish feature film. So he's been running back and forth between these two projects, and I think that's coming out in the fall. I'm not sure. And for me, I mean, my whole life right now is focusing on Ivalu and the life, with the campaigning and the Oscars and all that. And then the afterlife for that, we're going to travel with the film, and create more conversation. And what happens after that, we'll see.
If you ever find yourself in Toronto, I would be happy to. I would love to meet you in person eventually.
That would be great. Well, hopefully, I don't even know I mean, I've been to Toronto. I think it's a fabulous town, and I think just going on the airplane from Copenhagen to Toronto it gives you a hint of why it's so fantastic. Because I don't think I've ever been on an airplane with so many different nationalities. The films with languages and cultures and religions. I mean, it was the broadest catalog of film. And I think that gave a good sign of what the city is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very multicultural and very multi-ethnic. How long is the flight from Copenhagen to Toronto?
Oh, too long. I can't remember. It was too long. No, but we'll see. I don't even know. I mean, I know there's Toronto Film Festival that I've gone to before, and I don't even know if they have shorts. But if they do, we'll come and we'll be there, and I hope to see you.
They have the shortwave programs, and they have like an amazing shorts program. So definitely do submit the film for that. And again, congratulations to you, Anders. The cinematographer, I did not mention his name, but whoever did the cinematography, like amazing job.
His name is Rasmus Heise, and he's amazing. Anders and him, they always work together. And yeah, they have the best collaboration. They don't really communicate in a normal way. They just look at each other and they know, the next step. And so just watching them work together is pretty amazing. But I agree with you. I think he did a terrific job.
He did. And to like Mila and Mino, the two girls who played Ivalu, Pipaluk and Ivalu, they did a fantastic job. And like this is whatever is next for them, I wish the best for them and for all of you. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for taking the time to speak with me today, and congratulations.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. For the 2023 Oscar in the live action shorts category. This film, as you would have heard through my discussion with Rebecca, does talk about some very heavy topics, but it's also a beautiful film. And I think the two young actresses, Mila and Minu, did such an amazing job with their performances, especially for novices like to the craft. But I just think it's really important, and I do hope, like as Rebecca said, that it starts more conversations and people listen and pay attention to the children around them and take an interest in children, and also that it encourages people to work with looking for missing and indigenous children, because that is something that is prevalent all around the world, not just in Greenland, not just in Denmark, or not just in Canada or America, but it's all around the world. Like, people do need to, there's so many children that are missing, are in danger, and like a lot of it has to be because adults don't pay enough attention because we have so much going on in our own lives, but that's not an excuse. But again, thank you so much to Rebecca, and congratulations to her and to Anders, the director, Mila Minu, the entire cast, the cinematographer, the sound designer, everyone who worked on it. And I think I've been having an amazing time for 2023 so far, talking to different creatives and producers. I think this is also one of the first time since the ending of last year I've had more opportunities to speak to producers, and it's great to be able to learn about filmmaking and from their perspective, and also their own perspectives on the projects that they work on as well. And you'll find this episode of Carolyn Talks in video format as usual on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Carolyn_Hinds, CAROLYN_HINDS. And you can go to my R3 page, that's AUTHORY.com/Carolyn Hinds, and find all of my published work, writing, interviews, film analysis, film reviews, profiles, and also links to my other podcasts, such as So Here's What Happened. I co-host with my friend Lanisha Campbell. That is a monthly nerdy blurdy girl podcast where we talk about film, TV shows, manga, comics, all of that good stuff. We give our recommendations and the things we liked and didn't quite so like. And also my other podcast, which is temporarily on hiatus, I will soon start it back, Beyond the Romance. That is my Asian drama podcast where I talk about film, Asian dramas from all around Asia, so South Korea, Japan, China, Thailand, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Occasionally, I'll try to do some more Vietnamese dramas this year, and more Taiwanese dramas this year. And you'll find me on Instagram and Twitter at CarrieCNH12. That's CRRIECNH12. And until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, everyone, stay safe. Bye.